Welcome. Tonight, we invite you into a peaceful corner of the universe. The story begins on a distant, war-torn world, deep within the Segmentum Tempestus, where the Imperium of man's reach remains ever tenuous. There lies the volcanic planet of Voltaris, home to the fortress monastery of the Iron Shield chapter. It is a brutal world, where survival itself is a constant battle, and only the strongest emerge from the fiery wastelands. The people of Voltaris are hardened by the very nature of their world, trained from birth in the arts of war, for every soul knows that to live on Voltaris is to fight. Amidst these trials was a boy named Castiel. Born of a minor noble family, he was no stranger to the ceaseless conflicts of his planet, his body already bearing the scars of his youth. But there was something different about Castiel. He possessed a fire, an unbreakable will that saw him persevere where others would fall. From a young age, Castiel had been driven, rising above his peers in both combat and intellect, with an innate tactical mind that set him apart. When the Iron Shield came for their tithe, the chapter's Space Marines observed the annual combat trials, a brutal display of the planet's finest youths battling for the honor of ascension. Many fought, but it was Castiel who emerged victorious, standing tall among the fallen. His body bloodied, but his spirit unyielding. The Iron Shield took him without question. He was one of the chosen few. The trials did not end there. Upon being brought to the fortress monastery, high above the volcanic plains of Voltaris, Castiel and the other aspirants were subjected to the cruelest tests, designed not only to break their bodies but to shatter their minds. Weeks passed with no sleep, days spent in the fiery wastes without food or water, and endless battles against each other. Some fell to the environment, their minds unable to endure the weight of the trials, while others perished at the hands of their fellow aspirants. Castiel endured, driven by a vision of something greater. He had no illusions of glory. Glory was a fleeting thing in the Imperium. Castiel fought for duty, for the knowledge that he would stand as a protector of mankind, an unbreakable shield against the darkness beyond the stars. It was after one of the most grueling trials, a trek through the molten valleys where only a handful survived, that Castiel's potential truly became known. As he led the remaining aspirants back to the fortress, a great beast, native to Voltaris, erupted from the molten sea. A scaled creature, easily 3 times the size of a man, it fell upon the aspirants, slaughtering them with claws that could tear through ceramite. While the others panicked, Castiel did not. He moved with precision, his mind calm amidst the chaos, studying the creature, waiting for his moment. And then he struck. Using the terrain to his advantage, he led the beast into a trap, exploiting the fissures of the land to lure it onto unstable ground. As the creature stumbled, Castiel, wielding a broken spear from one of his fallen comrades, plunged the weapon through the beast's eye and into its brain. The others watched in awe as the monstrous creature collapsed, its death throes shaking the ground beneath them. Upon their return, the chapter's apothecaries took note of Castiel's actions. His cunning and ferocity marked him for greatness, and soon the gene seed of the Iron Shield was implanted into his body. Over the course of many months, Castiel underwent the transformation from human to space marine. His bones thickened, his muscles grew, and the Emperor's genetic gifts reshaped him into something more than mortal. As his body changed, so too did his mind. The chaplains of the chapter drilled the doctrines of the Iron Shield into his soul, the virtues of duty, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty to the Imperium. Yet, even among his fellow initiates, Castiel stood apart. His training advanced rapidly, excelling in combat drills and tactical simulations. While others focused on brute strength, Castiel honed his mind. He spent hours in the chapter's librarium, studying the histories of past campaigns, the strategies of ancient wars, and the writings of the chapter's revered leaders. Knowledge, he knew, was as powerful as any bolter or blade. Soon came the final trial, the battlefield. The Iron Shield had been called to a distant world, Kratos 9, where a rebellious planetary governor had renounced the Emperor's light and plunged the world into open revolt. Castiel, still an initiate, was sent alongside his squad into the heart of the conflict. It was here that he would be tested, not by simulations or trials, but by the true fires of war. Kratos 9 was a wasteland of war, its cities reduced to rubble, its people caught in the crossfire between loyalist forces and the traitor legions. The Iron Shield descended like the Emperor's wrath, and Castiel, now armed and armored in the power armor of a space marine, fought on the front lines. The enemy was fierce, their numbers vast, but they were no match for the fury of the Adeptus Astartes. Castiel's bolter barked as he tore through the heretics, his every strike measured, his every action precise. In the midst of battle, however, the rebels unleashed a forbidden weapon, a stolen piece of ancient Xenos technology. A massive energy blast cut through the loyalist forces, scattering them like leaves in the wind. Many of Castiel's brothers fell, but he stood firm. Rallying the survivors, he led a counterattack, exploiting the enemy's overconfidence and striking at the heart of their command. With precision and ferocity, Castiel stormed the enemy's fortress, cutting through the traitor guards and reaching the command center. There, he confronted the rebel leader, a corrupted governor who had sold his soul to dark powers. The man sneered at Castiel, wielding the stolen Xenos weapon as if it made him untouchable. But Castiel's mind was sharp, and he had already deduced the weapon's weakness. In a calculated strike, he disabled it, leaving the governor defenseless before delivering the Emperor's justice with a single fatal strike. The battle was won, the rebels crushed, but the cost had been high. Many of Castiel's brothers lay dead, their armor shattered, their lives given in service to the Emperor. As he stood among the ruins of Kratos 9, Castiel understood the weight of the responsibility he now carried. He was no longer a mere initiate. He was a space marine, an angel of death, forged in the crucible of war to defend the Imperium of Man. The chapter master himself commended Castiel's actions, and from that day forward, he was known among the Iron Shield as a warrior of great promise. But Castiel did not seek praise. His thoughts were always on the future, for he knew that greater battles awaited him, battles that would test not just his strength, but his very soul. And so, the legend of Castiel began. After the triumph on Kratos 9, Castiel's name carried weight within the Iron Shield chapter, but the galaxy allowed no time for rest. On the volcanic homeworld of Voltaris, beneath the glow of its twin suns, a new threat loomed on the horizon, one far more insidious and terrifying than any rebellion. Word reached the chapter through the astropathic choir. A Tyranid hive fleet, moving through the void, its tendrils creeping ever closer to Voltaris and its surrounding systems. The warning came too late for the nearby system of Hades, whose outlying planets had already fallen silent. The Tyranids, a relentless Xenos race, consumed all in their path, stripping entire worlds of their biomass and leaving nothing but barren husks behind. Where they went, death followed. The hive fleets were an ever-growing hunger, an unstoppable swarm driven by a singular, terrifying goal: consumption. To the Imperium, they were an extinction-level threat. Castiel, still a newly promoted sergeant, had been leading a task force across the subsector, quelling minor uprisings and hunting down remnants of the traitor forces from the Kratos 9 rebellion. But when the call from Voltaris came, he and his brothers were immediately recalled to defend their home. The chapter mobilized at once. The threat posed by the Tyranids was unlike anything the Iron Shield had faced before. The nature of this enemy was alien in every way, an unfeeling, ever-adapting swarm that operated as a singular organism. It had no fear, no hesitation, and no concept of retreat. The skies over Voltaris darkened as the Hive fleet neared. The Iron Shield's fleets took to space, ready to intercept the swarm before it could reach the planet. Castiel's command squad was deployed aboard the battle barge Hammer of Voltaris, its guns primed to engage the enemy. The strategy was clear: meet the Hive fleet in space, break their back in orbit, and prevent the Tyranids from ever making planetfall. But the Tyranids did not come as a mindless horde. Their attack was calculated, their biological ships surging forward like living torpedoes, their massive biocannons spitting corrosive acid and spore mines at the Imperial vessels. Space was filled with debris and fire as ships from both sides were ripped apart in the void. It was in the chaos of this battle that the Iron Shield discovered the true scale of the enemy. The Hive fleet was vast, far greater in number than the chapter had anticipated. Bioships, some larger than the chapter's capital vessels, tore through the Iron Shield's battle lines, disgorging endless waves of smaller Tyranid craft that swarmed their defenses. Castiel's strike cruiser found itself under direct attack by one of the larger bioships. The ship, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh, bone, and sinew, dwarfed their cruiser, its tendrils lashing out like giant serpents to latch onto their hull. The Iron Shield fought back fiercely, every gun on the cruiser firing in a desperate attempt to break free. But it was no use. The bioship tore into them, its tendrils burrowing into the hull, spewing hordes of Tyranid bioforms directly onto the cruiser's decks. The Tyranids poured in, a tide of claws, fangs, and chitinous armor. Castiel led his brothers into battle, bolters blazing, chainswords roaring, but the Xenos kept coming. They moved as one, every step perfectly coordinated, adapting their attacks as the Space Marines fought. They overwhelmed the outer decks in minutes, forcing the Iron Shield to fall back, making their stand in the heart of the ship. The corridors became kill zones, with Castiel directing his men to hold choke points while heavier firepower tore into the advancing Xenos. For every alien they killed, two more seemed to take its place. The air was thick with the smell of acid and blood, and the screeching of the Tyranids echoed through the ship like a nightmare. It was then that Castiel realized the nature of the Tyranid threat. They were not an enemy to be outmaneuvered or outgunned. They were a flood, a living tide that would drown everything in its path. For every victory his squad won, the swarm adapted, changing its tactics, sending forth new bioforms specifically engineered to counter the Space Marines' weapons and armor. Amidst the carnage, a new horror emerged from the darkness. A Hive tyrant. This creature, towering above even the largest of its brood, was the will of the Hive mind made manifest. It directed the swarm with perfect clarity, its psychic presence radiating like a beacon of malevolence. Castiel knew that if they did not kill this creature, they would all die. The battle between Castiel and the Hive tyrant was nothing short of cataclysmic. The beast's claws were like scythes, slicing through ceramite and flesh with ease. Its psychic attacks assaulted Castiel's mind, hammering at his defenses, threatening to overwhelm him. But Castiel's will was unbreakable. He fought with every ounce of his strength, parrying the tyrant's attacks with his power sword, his strikes precise and lethal. The fight raged through the ship's inner chambers, sparks flying as steel clashed with the alien's hardened claws. Castiel's squad fought valiantly to hold back the rest of the swarm, giving their sergeant the room he needed to engage the Hive tyrant. But it was no easy victory. The beast's speed and power were unnatural, and even as Castiel wounded it, the Tyranid adapted, its biology shifting and healing before his eyes. Realizing that brute force would not be enough, Castiel employed his tactical mind. Using the ship's environment to his advantage, He lured the Hive Tyrant into a cargo bay, where the Iron Shield had stored volatile plasma munitions. With a desperate charge, Castiel drove the Tyrant into the heart of the bay, then detonated the munitions in a controlled blast, vaporizing the creature in a fiery inferno. The explosion ripped through the bay, sending shockwaves through the ship, but it worked. The death of the Hive Tyrant sent a psychic shockwave through the swarm, disorienting the lesser creatures and disrupting their cohesion. In that moment of chaos, Castiel and his remaining brothers struck back with fury, pushing the Tyranids out of the ship, purging the Xenos with fire and bolter. The Hive fleet, its coordination shattered by the loss of its leader, began to falter. The Iron Shield seized the opportunity, rallying their forces across the battlefield and launching a counteroffensive. One by one, the bioships fell, blasted apart by Imperial firepower, their grotesque forms disintegrating in the cold vacuum of space. The battle was not without cost. Many brothers of the Iron Shield lay dead, their bodies entombed within the wreckage of their ships. But Voltaris had been saved, the Hive fleet broken before it could devour the planet. Castiel, bloodied but victorious, stood among the ruins of the ship, the echoes of battle still ringing in his ears. He had faced the shadow of the Hive and survived, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Tyranids were a galaxy-wide threat, and this Hive fleet, though crippled, was but a fragment of the greater menace lurking in the depths of space. The Imperium would not be safe until the entire swarm was eradicated. As Castiel looked out into the void, he knew that the fight against the Tyranids was far from over. This victory had merely bought them time. In the wake of the bitter conflict with the Tyranids, the Iron Shield chapter found itself reeling from the losses sustained in the defense of Voltaris. Castiel, now a decorated sergeant, bore the weight of his fallen brothers, their sacrifices etched deeply into his soul. The respite, however brief, was interrupted by grim tidings. Hades III, a lush planet known for its abundant resources and strategic position, had fallen silent. Reports indicated that the Tyranids had regrouped and were launching a renewed assault on the world, seeking to consume its rich biomass. The planet was critical to the Imperium. It provided essential supplies for several nearby systems, and its loss would be catastrophic. The Iron Shield chapter received the call to arms, and once more, they prepared for battle. The journey to Hades III was swift, as the chapter's battle barges surged through the warp, their hulls bristling with weaponry and a fervent determination. As they emerged from the warp, the scene that greeted them was one of chaos and devastation. The orbital defenses had fallen, and the planet's surface was shrouded in thick, toxic clouds, signs of war, and the aftermath of Tyranid bombardments. The skies were filled with the wreckage of Imperial vessels, and the sight was a grim reminder of the enemy's relentless nature. Upon arrival, Castiel stood on the command bridge of the Hammer of Voltaris, alongside the chapter master and the remaining officers. Hades III was under siege, and the reports from the ground were dire. Tyranid forces had landed across the planet in waves, overwhelming the Imperial Guard and securing key locations. The Loyalist forces were falling back, regrouping around the last bastions of hope, a massive fortress known as Fort Regulus, located on the planet's northern continent. The Iron Shield chapter launched a full-scale assault to break the siege and liberate Fort Regulus. Castiel's squad was assigned to spearhead the assault. Their mission was clear: land on the surface, link up with the remaining Loyalist forces, and coordinate an attack to retake the fortress from the grasp of the Tyranids. As their drop pod hurtled through the atmosphere, Castiel prepared himself mentally for the battle ahead. The roaring of the engines drowned out all thoughts of the past, focusing him on the present. The moment the drop pod slammed into the ground, the hatch burst open, revealing a war-torn landscape. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burnt flesh, while the ground trembled under the relentless advance of the Tyranids. Emerging from the drop pod, Castiel surveyed the chaotic battlefield. The sky above was dark with the forms of flying Tyranids, harpies and shrikes darting among the ruins of the once thriving city that surrounded Fort Regulus. Ground forces were engaged in desperate firefights, with guardsmen fighting valiantly against the tide of Xenos. The sight of their desperate struggle filled Castiel with determination. He could not allow these brave soldiers to fall without support. The squad charged forward, bolters raised, firing into the swarming Xenos. The first waves of Tyranids were met with precise and deadly fire. Each shot rang true, exploding through chitinous armor and sending green ichor spraying across the battlefield. The Tyranids, however, were relentless. They surged forward, their grotesque forms pressing against the line of defenders. Castiel called out tactical commands, urging his brothers to advance. They fought their way through the throngs, moving as a single unit, supporting each other, and leaving no room for error. As they approached the crumbling walls of Fort Regulus, Castiel's squad was met by a group of beleaguered Imperial Guardsmen. Their uniforms tattered, their faces grim. The soldiers had taken heavy losses, their morale wavering under the relentless pressure of the Tyranids. Castiel quickly assessed the situation, rallying the guardsmen to join their cause. "Hold fast. We will break the siege together," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise of battle. Under his command, they fortified their position, regrouping to push back against the oncoming waves of Tyranids. The fort's walls had been partially breached, and Castiel understood that their first task was to eliminate the Tyranids that had infiltrated the fortress. With renewed vigor, they moved to secure the breach, knowing that the fate of Hades III depended on their success. As they fought to reclaim the fort, the Tyranids adapted to their tactics, deploying new bioforms that had emerged from the depths of the swarm. A new horror emerged, Tyranid warriors equipped with spine fists, launching deadly projectiles that pierced the reinforced armor of the Imperial Guard. The situation grew increasingly dire. Castiel's squad, still resolute, fell back to the heart of the fortress, regrouping to prepare for a final stand. Inside Fort Regulus, Castiel received a transmission from the chapter master, detailing the larger strategy. Reinforcements were en route, but they needed to hold the fort long enough for the full might of the Iron Shield to arrive. Time was not on their side. The Tyranids were pressing in, the sounds of their chittering and screeching echoing through the corridors of the fort. Rallying the troops, Castiel devised a desperate plan. They would create a kill zone, using the fort's layout to their advantage. He assigned positions to the remaining guardsmen and his brothers, ensuring that every angle was covered. As the Tyranids closed in, the defenders braced for the assault. The first wave crashed against the walls, the Tyranids surging forward like a tide. The defenders unleashed a storm of fire, their combined weapons roaring in unison. Bolter rounds impacted with explosive force, tearing through the Xenos ranks, but still they came. Castiel moved through the chaos. His power soared a blur of motion, cleaving through enemy ranks. Each strike was fueled by the knowledge of what was at stake. As the battle raged on, a massive Tyranid bioconstruct emerged, a monstrous creature known as a Carnifex. Its armored shell was nearly impervious to fire, and it charged into the fray, trampling everything in its path. Castiel recognized that the fort's defenses were about to break. With a roar, he rallied his squad, leading them in a coordinated charge against the beast. As they engaged the Carnifex, the defenders focused their fire on the creature's exposed joints and bioplating. It roared in rage, swinging its massive claws and smashing into the fort's defenses. Castiel called upon his brothers to flank the beast, using their superior agility and training to outmaneuver it. It was a brutal struggle, but as the Carnifex turned, Castiel seized the moment, plunging his power sword into the creature's side, finding the gap between its armor plates. The creature let out a death throw, collapsing in a heap, its body crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact. The tide of battle shifted. The fall of the Carnifex instilled new hope among the defenders. The remaining Tyranids hesitated, their cohesion faltering. With renewed resolve, Castiel led a counteroffensive. The defenders surged forward, pushing the Tyranids back inch by inch. Bolters roared as they carved through the Xenos swarm, the defenders finally reclaiming their ground. In the midst of this turmoil, a massive shadow loomed behind the defenders. A new, more terrifying presence emerged, the Hive Tyrant. This abomination had survived the battle in space and now commanded the remaining Tyranids with an iron grip. It stood tall, its presence exuding a palpable dread. As it unleashed a psychic scream, it bolstered the Tyranids' morale and threw the defenders into disarray. Castiel felt the weight of dread wash over the battlefield. He knew this creature had to be stopped. Gathering his brothers, he initiated a tactical assault, calling upon the remaining Imperial Guard to support them in a final push. Together, they charged the Hive Tyrant, their minds focused on the task ahead. The battle was fierce. The Hive Tyrant retaliated, swinging its massive bone sword and unleashing psychic blasts that sent guardsmen flying. But Castiel was resolute. He and his squad maneuvered with precision, using the chaos of the battle to their advantage. The Hive Tyrant became surrounded, and Castiel exploited every opportunity to strike. Each swing of his sword aimed at crippling the beast. At last, after what felt like an eternity, Castiel saw his opening. With a fierce roar, he launched himself at the Hive Tyrant, his power sword poised to strike. In one decisive blow, he plunged the blade into the creature's chest, piercing its heart. The Hive Tyrant let out a terrible scream, collapsing in a flurry of limbs and ichor. With its death, the remaining Tyranids faltered, their will to fight broken. The battle was won, but it was a hollow victory. The price had been steep, and the losses were heavy. As Castiel surveyed the battlefield, he realized the depth of their struggle. Hades III was safe for now, but the scars of war would linger long after the echoes of battle faded. The planet had endured, but the specter of the Tyranids would loom ever closer. The Iron Shield chapter regrouped. Their brothers gathered to mourn the fallen, each soul remembered and honored. Castiel, his heart heavy, knew that the fight was far from over. As he stood amongst his brothers, he resolved to carry on, to protect the Imperium from the darkness that threatened to engulf it. The galaxy was vast and filled with terrors, and as long as there was breath in his lungs, he would stand against the tide of Xenos and chaos. The Iron Shield chapter had barely begun to recover from the devastation of the siege on Hades III when the shadows of a new threat began to loom over the Imperium. The galaxy was ever vast and filled with peril, and whispers reached the chapter's ears of the return of the Thousand Suns, a traitorous legion that had once been noble, now twisted and corrupted by the influence of chaos. Their newfound ambitions threatened the fragile peace that the Iron Shields had fought so hard to restore. Castiel, now a full-fledged hero of his chapter, was summoned to the command center of the Hammer of Voltaris. As he entered, he was met by Chapter Master Valerius, who stood surrounded by his advisors, their expressions grim. A holographic display projected above the table, revealing the system of Osiris, a world of rich resources that the Thousand Suns had begun to target. Osiris was strategically located, its resources crucial for any further campaigns against the Tyranids, making it a prime objective for both the Iron Shields and their enemies. Valerius gestured to the holographic display, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. The Thousand Sons seek to claim Osiris for their own. We cannot allow them to establish a foothold. Their sorcery and treachery would spell doom for the surrounding systems. The room fell silent, each space marine contemplating the implications of this new threat. Reports indicated that the Thousand Sons were amassing forces in the abandoned ruins of an ancient city on Osiris. These ruins were steeped in psychic energy, remnants of a long-lost civilization that had thrived before the Age of Strife. As the chapter prepared to engage, Castiel felt the familiar pang of urgency that he had experienced before battles. This would not be a straightforward conflict. The Thousand Sons were masters of manipulation and deceit, wielding sorcery that could turn the tide of battle in the blink of an eye. As the Iron Shield battle barges entered the atmosphere of Osiris, Castiel and his squad gathered on the drop bay of the Hammer of Voltaris. The air was thick with tension, and the warriors prepared themselves mentally and physically for the upcoming engagement. Castiel's mind turned to the rumors surrounding the Thousand Sons, of their sorcery, their twisted forms, and their insidious leaders, who could manipulate reality itself. Upon landing, the squad emerged from their drop pod into a world steeped in twilight. The ancient city sprawled before them, its once magnificent structures now crumbling into ruin, shrouded in a sinister mist. Shadows danced between the buildings, suggesting that they were not alone. Castiel took a deep breath, the atmosphere heavy with foreboding. "Stay sharp," he commanded, his voice steady. "The Thousand Sons will not fight fair." As they advanced into the ruins, the squad moved cautiously. Echoes of distant chanting reached their ears, a rhythmic sound that sent shivers down their spines. Castiel signaled for silence, and the squad halted, listening intently. The chanting grew louder, a twisted incantation that resonated with dark power. Suddenly, shadows surged forth from the depths of the ruins, coalescing into the grotesque forms of the Thousand Sons. They emerged clad in their characteristic blue and gold armor, adorned with the symbols of Tsench, the chaos god of change. The Thousand Sons charged, their power swords glinting ominously in the dim light. Castiel shouted commands to his brothers, urging them to form up. Bolter fire erupted as the iron shields returned fire, the sound ringing out like thunder against the backdrop of the ancient city. The air crackled with psychic energy as the Thousand Sons retaliated, their sorcery manifesting in bursts of bright light and bursts of flame. The battle that ensued was brutal and chaotic. The Thousand Sons advanced, their psychic powers weaving through the battlefield, distorting reality and creating illusions to confuse the defenders. Castiel was at the forefront, his power sword flashing as he engaged the enemy. His brothers fought valiantly, holding their ground against the tide of sorcerous warriors. The fighting was intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. In the midst of the chaos, Castiel noticed a larger figure looming behind the Thousand Sons, an Astartes clad in ornate armor that was far more elaborate than his brothers. It was a sorcerer of the Thousand Sons, a powerful figure who radiated dark energy. With each gesture, he unleashed blasts of warp energy, tearing through the Iron Shield's ranks and sowing discord among their lines. Realizing that they had to eliminate the sorcerer to turn the tide of the battle, Castiel rallied his squad for a coordinated assault. "We must take out that sorcerer," he shouted, pointing towards the powerful figure. They moved with urgency, pressing through the melee to engage the enemy. Bolter fire erupted around them, and the air crackled with the energy of the psychic battle. As they pressed closer, the sorcerer unleashed a wave of energy that sent several of Castiel's brothers flying. The defenders struggled against the tide of sorcery, but Castiel pressed on, undeterred. With every step, he felt the weight of his brother's sacrifice guiding him, and he knew that victory was their only option. The squad finally reached the sorcerer, a fierce confrontation erupting between the two sides. The sorcerer's powers were formidable, manifesting as bolts of warp energy that danced in the air like lightning. Castiel, fueled by determination, engaged the sorcerer in close combat, dodging blasts of psychic energy and retaliating with precise strikes of his power sword. The clash was a battle of wills. Castiel parried the sorcerer's strikes, his sword meeting the psychic blade with a resounding clang. They danced around each other, exchanging blows in a deadly duel, as the sounds of the surrounding battle faded into the background. Castiel's focus narrowed. He had to overcome this foe, and he summoned every ounce of strength and skill he possessed. In a moment of clarity, Castiel saw an opening. He lunged forward, slicing through the sorcerer's defenses, and with a final, powerful thrust, he plunged his sword deep into the sorcerer's chest. The sorcerer's eyes widened in shock, and as he crumpled to the ground, a wave of energy pulsed through the battlefield. The remaining 1,000 Suns faltered, their connection to their leader severed, and confusion spread among their ranks. With their sorcerer defeated, the 1,000 Suns began to retreat, but the iron shields pressed their advantage. Castiel rallied his brothers, commanding them to pursue the fleeing traitors. The tide of battle turned, and as they pushed deeper into the city, they began to reclaim lost ground, pushing back the 1,000 Suns in a determined counteroffensive. The remnants of the 1,000 Suns scattered into the shadows, their ambitions thwarted, but Castiel knew this victory was but a temporary reprieve. The true nature of the enemy's plans remained shrouded in mystery, and their defeat here would only drive them to plot their vengeance in secret. As the dust settled and the ruins of the ancient city lay in silence, Castiel took a moment to reflect. The cost of victory was heavy, but they had secured Osiris, for now. The Iron Shield chapter had proven their resolve against the traitors, but the galaxy was vast, and the threats they faced were far from over. The shadows of the 1,000 Suns would linger, their dark ambitions concealed behind the veil of chaos. The Iron Shield stood vigilant, knowing that as long as there was darkness in the galaxy, their fight was far from finished. With each battle fought, each brother lost, Castiel resolved to remain steadfast, for the Imperium depended on the unwavering courage of the Space Marines. They would not falter, and they would not yield to the forces that sought to tear their galaxy apart. The war against the darkness would continue, and Castiel would lead the charge, determined to protect humanity from the horrors that lay beyond the stars. The air on Osiris was thick with tension as the Iron Shield chapter prepared for what would become a monumental confrontation. Following their recent victories, the chapter had learned of a hidden facility deep within the ruins of an ancient city. Reports indicated that this facility was a remnant of a time before the Age of Strife, filled with technology and secrets that could tip the balance in the ongoing war against the 1,000 Suns and the Tyranids. However, it was also rumored to harbor a terrifying power, an ancient entity known as the Psyche that could bend the wills of those who dared approach it. Castiel, having proven himself as a capable leader, was appointed to lead the expedition into the depths of the ruins. As he gathered his squad, the weight of responsibility bore down on him. They would not only be risking their lives, but also potentially awakening a force that could prove catastrophic if it fell into the wrong hands. The ruins loomed before them, an intricate labyrinth of crumbling stone and twisted metal, filled with echoes of a long-forgotten past. The remnants of ancient architecture stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time, their majesty now tainted by the encroaching darkness of the present. The iron shields entered the structure, their power armor echoing through the empty halls. The atmosphere was heavy, saturated with psychic energy that sent shivers down Castiel's spine. As they navigated the labyrinth, the squad was assaulted by flickering images and whispers that danced at the edges of their perception. It became increasingly evident that the facility was more than just a relic. It was alive with the vestiges of psychic energy, remnants of those who had once inhabited this place. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the very walls were closing in around them. Suddenly, the squad entered a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center of the room stood an ancient device, its surface covered in runes and symbols that glowed faintly with a sickly light. The device hummed with energy, a resonance that echoed through the air. Castiel felt an overwhelming urge to approach it, a call that tugged at the very core of his being. He hesitated, knowing that this could be a trap, a trick played by the remnants of the psyche. "Stay vigilant," Castiel warned, scanning the chamber for signs of danger. His brothers took their positions, bolters raised, ready to fire at a moment's notice. As they prepared, a low, resonant voice echoed throughout the chamber, whispering promises of power and knowledge to those who dared to listen. The voice twisted around them like smoke, tempting each of them with dark secrets and forbidden wisdom. Castiel fought against the pull of the voice, drawing upon his training and faith. He focused on the present, on the mission at hand. "We must secure this device before it falls into the wrong hands," he ordered, signaling his brothers to close ranks. As they approached the device, a sudden surge of energy rippled through the chamber, and the shadows deepened. From the darkness, figures emerged, cloaked in ethereal robes that shimmered like starlight. These were the spectral remnants of those who had once wielded the psyche, now twisted by the very power they sought to control. The apparitions reached out with ghostly hands, attempting to ensnare the minds of the Iron Shields. Panic and confusion rippled through the squad as they fought against the psychic assault. "Focus! Resist their influence!" Castiel shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He rallied his brothers, urging them to draw upon their training and the strength of their brotherhood. The Iron Shields formed a protective circle, bolters trained on the advancing spirits. Together, they fired, bolts of solid mass tearing through the apparitions, dispelling them into nothingness. Yet the specters were relentless, reforming and attacking with renewed vigor. Castiel felt the weight of their despair and rage pushing against his mind, a palpable force that threatened to overwhelm him. It was then he realized that the true battle lay within. The siege would not be one of weapons and armor, but of will and determination. With a surge of inner strength, Castiel focused on the device at the center of the chamber. He recognized that the ancient technology was a conduit for the psychic energy that enveloped them. "We must destroy it," he declared, his voice ringing with resolve. "It is the source of their power." His brothers nodded, understanding the urgency of their mission. Together, they advanced towards the device, each step heavy with the weight of their purpose. As they approached, the voices grew louder, swirling around them like a tempest, begging them to turn back, to join them in the embrace of power. Castiel, steeling himself against the onslaught, raised his power sword high. "For the Emperor," he roared, bringing the blade down upon the device. The impact sent shockwaves through the chamber, the device shuddering as cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. Energy surged outward, lancing through the air, and the voices screamed in fury and despair. The spectral figures writhed in agony as the device shattered, releasing a burst of energy that illuminated the chamber in a blinding light. Castiel and his brothers shielded their eyes, feeling the force wash over them. The voices faded, replaced by silence. When the light subsided, the ancient device lay in ruins, its power extinguished. The squad stood in the aftermath, panting and weary. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, replaced by a sense of relief. They had successfully neutralized the threat, but Castiel knew the victory came at a cost. The loss of the device had disrupted the delicate balance of power within the ruins, and he could feel the repercussions echoing through the galaxy. As they made their way back through the labyrinth of ruins, Castiel contemplated the nature of the battle they had fought. The siege of the mind had been a testament to the resilience of the Iron Shields, but it had also revealed the insidious nature of their enemies. The psychic energy that had once sought to ensnare them now lay dormant, but he understood that the threat of the Thousand Suns and other dark forces still loomed. Emerging from the ruins, Castiel felt the weight of their mission settle upon him. The galaxy was fraught with danger, and the fight against the darkness would continue. They had won this battle, but the war against chaos and its many manifestations was far from over. With the resolve of a true space marine, Castiel vowed to lead his brothers into the fray again and again, for as long as they drew breath, fighting for the Imperium and the Emperor. In the days that followed, the Iron Shields would regroup and prepare for their next campaign, aware that the shadows would always seek to encroach upon the light. But Castiel carried the strength of his brothers with him, and as they stood united, they knew they would face whatever came next with courage and unwavering resolve. The galaxy may be dark, but they would be the beacon of hope, ready to defend humanity against all threats, both external and within. In the aftermath of their victory against the Thousand Suns and the disruptions caused by the Psyche, the Iron Shield chapter had regained a momentary semblance of calm. However, Castiel and his brothers knew all too well that this tranquility was merely the eye of the storm. Rumors had begun to circulate of a devastating warp storm brewing in the void, a phenomenon that could engulf entire systems and obliterate all hope within its reach. The chapter had received an urgent transmission from the Adeptus Mechanicus, detailing the imminent threat posed by the warp storm, which was drawing nearer to the worlds they had sworn to protect. The Council of War convened aboard the Hammer of Voltaris, its command center bustling with activity. Space Marines in their imposing power armor moved swiftly, discussing tactical strategies and potential responses to the impending crisis. Castiel stood before the table, the holographic display showcasing the encroaching storm, its chaotic energies crackling ominously. Chapter Master Valerius's voice resonated through the chamber, filled with authority and concern. We must understand the nature of this warp storm. If we do not act swiftly, it could swallow entire planets and consume everything in its path. The mood in the room grew grim, as all present recognized the magnitude of the threat. The reports indicated that the storm was not a natural occurrence but a manifestation of the Chaos God's will, an intentional act to destabilize the Imperium. As they discussed potential strategies, it became clear that the only way to combat the storm and protect the surrounding systems was to enter the heart of the warp and confront whatever darkness awaited them there. Castiel, always eager to protect his brothers and humanity, volunteered to lead a strike team into the warp storm. He knew the risks were monumental. The warp was a realm of chaos and madness, where time and space were malleable, and the laws of reality often ceased to exist. Still, if there was a chance to mitigate the storm's effects and uncover its source, they had to take it. The strike team comprised a select few of the Iron Shields, chosen for their unwavering resolve and psychic resistance. Each Space Marine knew the dangers that lay ahead, but their loyalty to the Emperor and their chapter burned brightly in their hearts. As they boarded their strike cruiser, the Vigilant Watcher, a solemn silence fell over them, the gravity of their mission weighing heavily on their minds. With the ship's engines humming to life, Castiel took a moment to reflect on the journey ahead. As the vessel entered the warp, the familiar sight of the stars faded into a swirling maelstrom of color and energy. The vastness of the universe was replaced by a cacophony of chaotic forces that twisted and turned around them, shifting in ways that defied logic. The strike cruiser trembled as it traversed the storm, the hull creaking under the strain of the turbulent currents of the warp. Castiel could feel the psychic energies pressing against the vessel, whispering temptations and threats that clawed at his mind. He closed his eyes, centering himself in the teachings of the Emperor, drawing upon his faith to shield his thoughts from the insidious influence of chaos. As they pushed deeper into the storm, the ship was jolted by violent currents, alarms blaring throughout the vessel. The crew struggled to maintain control as they were thrust into a turbulent expanse of reality, where the laws of physics seemed to bend and warp. Castiel's squad secured their positions, bolters ready, knowing that the storm was not merely an obstacle but a living entity that sought to devour them. Suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated the dark void around them, and reality twisted. They found themselves standing upon a shattered landscape, an alien world suspended in the chaos of the warp. The ground pulsed with energy, shifting beneath their feet, as twisted spires of obsidian rose from the surface, stretching toward a sky of swirling colors. "Steady yourselves," Castiel commanded, scanning their surroundings for signs of danger. As the strike team regrouped, they realized they were not alone. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision, figures cloaked in dark robes, their features obscured by the swirling mists of the warp. The figures emerged, revealing themselves to be demonic entities, warped manifestations of chaos that sought to ensnare the minds of the intruders. They taunted the Space Marines with whispers of despair and temptation, promising power beyond comprehension if they would only submit to the will of the Dark Gods. The air crackled with tension as the demons advanced, their forms shifting and changing, revealing glimpses of their horrific true natures. Castiel felt the oppressive weight of their presence, but he stood firm, rallying his brothers. "We fight for the Emperor," he shouted, raising his bolter and firing upon the nearest demon. The explosive rounds tore through the creature, causing it to scream in rage and agony before dissipating into nothingness. The battle that ensued was a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. The demons surged forward, their dark powers manifesting in blasts of energy that tore through the air. The strike team fought valiantly, bolters barking as they unleashed a torrent of fire upon their foes. Despite the chaos around them, the iron shields displayed discipline and unity, their training honed over years of warfare guiding them in this dark realm. Amidst the chaos, Castiel spotted a massive demon, a towering figure wreathed in flames and shadows, directing the smaller demons with malevolent glee. This creature was a herald of chaos, a being of immense power that seemed to revel in the destruction it wrought. Castiel knew they had to eliminate this foe if they were to stand any chance of overcoming the storm. With his brothers at his side, Castiel led a charge toward the massive demon, weaving through blasts of energy and swarming demons. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air crackled with psychic energy as they pressed on. The demon laughed, its voice a guttural echo that resonated through the chaos, mocking the Space Marines as they approached. "Foolish mortals," it bellowed, raising its arms as if to draw power from the very warp around them. "You dare challenge the will of chaos? Your defiance is but a spark in the void." Ignoring the taunts, Castiel pressed forward, his heart racing with determination. As they closed the distance, the demon unleashed a wave of energy, sending a shockwave that knocked several of Castiel's brothers off their feet. He staggered but quickly regained his footing, rallying those who remained. "Press on. We cannot falter," he roared, his resolve unyielding. The squad regrouped and advanced, determined to bring down the herald. Bolter fire erupted, rounds striking the creature and illuminating the dark surroundings with flashes of light. The demon howled in rage, retaliating with blasts of energy that tore through the air, striking down one of Castiel's brothers. With fury ignited within him, Castiel charged forward, power sword drawn, fueled by the loss of his brother. He leaped through the chaos, deflecting a wave of dark energy with his sword and closing in on the demon. As he reached it, he swung his blade in a wide arc, cleaving through the air with the weight of his righteous fury. The blade struck true, embedding itself in the demon's flesh. It roared in pain, thrashing violently as Castiel pressed his advantage, pouring all his strength into the strike. The demon staggered back, the connection to the warp wavering. In that moment, Castiel felt the power of the Emperor guiding him, a surge of energy igniting his resolve. With a final, powerful thrust, Castiel drove his sword deep into the demon's core, invoking the Emperor's name. The creature let out a horrid scream, the sound reverberating through the warp as it disintegrated in a blinding flash of light. The smaller demons faltered, their connection to the greater power severed, and they began to dissipate into the chaos from whence they came. With the herald defeated, the remaining demons fled into the shadows, leaving the strike team standing amidst the wreckage of the battlefield. The air around them shimmered, and reality began to shift once more, the landscape warping as the storm reacted to the death of its champion. As the energies of the warp surged, Castiel felt a deep pull, as if the storm sought to reclaim them. He turned to his brothers, a sense of urgency coursing through him. "We must find a way back. The storm is shifting," he shouted, the gravity of the situation setting in. The strike team sprinted through the treacherous terrain, dodging rippling bursts of energy and twisting shadows. They knew they had to escape before the storm consumed them entirely. As they navigated the chaotic landscape, the very fabric of reality shifted and warped, presenting new dangers at every turn. Through sheer determination, Castiel and his brothers pushed forward, finally spotting a flickering portal of light, an exit from the realm of chaos. With a final burst of speed, they leaped toward the portal, the energies of the warp clawing at their heels. They dove through, feeling the weight of the storm fade as they were pulled back into the material realm. Emerging aboard the Vigilant Watcher, the crew scrambled to assess the damage. The strike team was battered but alive, their spirits unwavering. Castiel felt the adrenaline of their survival coursing through him, a reminder of the bond forged in the crucible of war. As the ship regained its course, the squad began to regroup, tending to their wounds and sharing tales of their harrowing experience within the warp storm. Castiel knew that they had faced a darkness that many would never comprehend, a shadow that lurked at the fringes of reality, waiting for any sign of weakness to strike. With their victory against the Herald of Chaos, the Iron Shields had not only survived the storm but had gained a vital understanding of the threat posed by the warp. They knew that the battle was far from over, that the chaos of the warp would always be a looming menace, seeking to disrupt the balance of the galaxy. As the Vigilant Watcher sailed away from the storm, Castiel contemplated their next steps. They would return to Osiris, but the knowledge they had gained in the warp would prepare them for the challenges to come. The bonds of brotherhood among the Iron Shields had been tested, and they had emerged stronger, ready to face the darkness with unwavering resolve and the Emperor's light guiding their path. As the Iron Shield chapter prepared for their next campaign, news arrived that sent ripples of tension throughout the ranks. A distress signal had been intercepted from the planet Prospero, a world long associated with the Thousand Suns. Once a bastion of psychic knowledge and a thriving center of learning, it had descended into chaos and ruin. Reports indicated that remnants of the Thousand Suns, twisted and corrupted, had taken control of the ancient city of Tisca, once a beacon of wisdom and culture, now defiled and overrun by the sorceries of the Chaos Gods. The chapter master, Valerius, convened the Council of War aboard the Hammer of Voltaris. The air was heavy with anticipation, every space marine present acutely aware of the weight of their mission. Castiel, leading the discussion, analyzed the data streaming across the holographic display. The once majestic structures of Tisca were now shrouded in shadows, with demonic entities reported within the city's ruins. What had once been a place of enlightenment was now a hub of corruption, threatening not only Prospero but potentially the wider Imperium as well. This is more than just a skirmish. This is a confrontation with the essence of chaos itself. Valerius warned, his expression grave. We must cleanse Prospero and eradicate the taint of the Thousand Suns. The Iron Shields began their preparations, rallying to their battle stations aboard the strike cruiser Vigilant Watcher. Castile, along with his battle brothers, donned their power armor, checking their weapons and supplies. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of determination and grim foreboding. They were not just fighting against the remnants of a fallen legion. They were stepping into a den of sorcery and madness. As the ship broke through the atmosphere of Prospero, the landscape below unfolded. A harsh world of deep blues and vibrant greens, but marred by dark patches of decay. The once proud city of Tisca loomed in the distance, its spires now twisted and broken, the air thick with acrid smoke and the distant echoes of unearthly sounds. With a thunderous roar, the drop pods deployed, streaking towards the surface. Castile felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as the capsule hurtled down, the sound of screaming engines and the heavy thuds of the impact resonating through his body. The doors of the drop pod burst open, revealing a battlefield overrun with chaotic energies. The moment they disembarked, the Iron Shields were greeted by a sight that sent shivers down their spines. The once grand architecture of Tisca was now an eerie silhouette against the darkening sky. The streets were littered with the remnants of a culture long lost, twisted statues and charred remains of structures that had once been full of life. An oppressive presence hung in the air, a palpable sense of dread that made the hairs on the back of Castile's neck stand on end. "Form up," Castile commanded, leading his brothers forward, bolters at the ready. They advanced cautiously, scanning their surroundings for any signs of the enemy. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant sound of warping reality, a haunting reminder of the sorcery that permeated the air. As they moved deeper into the city, visions of the past flickered before their eyes, memories of grandeur intermingled with horrors. Castile could almost feel the weight of the knowledge that had once thrived here, now twisted into something dark and perverse. He could hear whispers, remnants of psychic echoes that sought to invade his mind, promising power and knowledge in exchange for servitude. Shaking off the influence, he pressed forward, resolute. Suddenly, a surge of dark energy erupted from a nearby alleyway, as a group of Thousand Suns warriors, clad in their distinctive blue power armor, emerged from the shadows. Their eyes glowed with a sickly light, and they chanted incantations in an ancient tongue, summoning the very energies of the warp to their aid. The air thickened with a palpable tension as Castile raised his bolter, ready to engage. "Fire!" he shouted, and a hail of bullets erupted from his squad. The rounds tore into the Thousand Suns, but their armor, imbued with the powers of chaos, deflected much of the onslaught. The sorcerers retaliated, unleashing bursts of psychic energy that crackled through the air, impacting the ground with explosive force. The battle raged as the two forces clashed, the Iron Shields standing firm against the twisted sorcery of their foes. Castile fought with relentless determination, his bolter roaring as he moved in concert with his brothers, forming a bulwark against the advancing enemy. They were outnumbered, but their training and resolve shone through. With every fallen Thousand Sun, the pressure of the dark magic lifted slightly, the whispers in Castile's mind growing quieter. In the heart of the melee, Castile spotted a powerful sorcerer among the Thousand Suns, clad in ornate armor, a staff crackling with psychic energy in hand. This figure radiated an aura of command, directing the other warriors with gestures that warped the fabric of reality. Castiel knew that eliminating this sorcerer could turn the tide of battle. Gathering his strength, he pushed through the chaos, weaving past his battle brothers and heading toward the dark figure. The sorcerer turned, his eyes locking onto Castiel's, and a malicious grin spread across his face. "Foolish Astartes, you think you can extinguish the flame of knowledge? This world is ours, and the powers of chaos are mine to command." He raised his staff, unleashing a torrent of energy toward Castiel, who narrowly dodged the blast. With a growl of determination, Castiel charged, his power sword humming with energy as he closed the distance. The sorcerer retaliated, but Castiel was quick, deflecting the bursts of energy with his blade. Each clash resonated through the air, the energy of their combat palpable. As they fought, Castiel felt the weight of the knowledge that had once thrived in Tisca pressing upon him. A duality of enlightenment and darkness. The sorcerer's words echoed in his mind, tempting him with the promise of power and knowledge. But Castiel, rooted in his faith, remained steadfast, refusing to yield to the lure of chaos. With a final, powerful strike, Castiel plunged his power sword deep into the heart of the sorcerer, feeling the surge of righteous fury course through him. The sorcerer let out a shriek, the sound echoing through the streets as he disintegrated into a shower of arcane energy. The remaining 1,000 Suns faltered, confusion spreading among their ranks as their leader fell. Taking advantage of the moment, Castiel rallied his brothers. "Push forward. We will cleanse this city." They surged together, bolters roaring as they pressed against the weakened enemy. The tide of battle shifted, the iron shields driving the 1,000 Suns back, reclaiming Tisca, one street at a time. The remnants of the 1,000 Suns began to fall back, retreating deeper into the city, their morale shattered by the death of their leader. Castiel and his brothers pursued, determined to rid Prospero of the taint of chaos. As they navigated the ruins, they encountered pockets of resistance, skirmishes breaking out as they pushed deeper into the heart of Tisca. With every victory, the oppressive presence in the air began to lift, the whispers of madness dissipating. But Castiel knew this fight was far from over. The city held dark secrets, and the 1,000 Suns would not relinquish their hold without a final, desperate stand. As they reached the central plaza, the very heart of the city, the landscape changed. The once grand architecture lay in ruins, surrounded by remnants of ancient knowledge, scrolls, tomes, and artifacts that had once been cherished. Yet, amidst the decay, a sense of foreboding lingered. The plaza was dominated by a massive, cracked monolith, a relic from a time long past, pulsating with the residual energies of the warp. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from the monolith, and a host of demonic entities poured forth. The air thickened with the stench of decay as twisted forms materialized, their eyes glowing with malevolence. They surged toward the iron shields, seeking to reclaim the city for chaos. "Stand firm," Castiel commanded, raising his bolter and opening fire. The iron shields formed a tight line, their weapons blazing as they pushed back against the tide of darkness. Each demonic entity that fell echoed with the promise of victory, but Castiel could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him. The monolith's energy was intensifying, as if feeding the very forces of chaos. In the midst of the chaos, Castiel's eyes locked onto the monolith. He understood now that it was a conduit, a link to the greater powers of the warp. If they did not destroy it, the tide of chaos would continue unabated, and their victory would be meaningless. "Brothers, to the monolith!" Castiel shouted, rallying his brothers for a final push. They fought their way through the seething mass of demonic entities, bolters roaring and swords flashing in the dim light. As they reached the base of the monolith, Castiel could feel its energies swirling around him, clawing at his mind, tempting him with visions of power and knowledge. But he resisted, channeling his focus and determination into the task at hand. "We must destroy it," he yelled, gathering his brothers around the base. They set charges, their hands steady despite the chaos swirling around them. The demonic entities swarmed, furious at their intrusion, but the iron shields held strong. With a roar, Castiel detonated the charges, and the monolith erupted in a blinding flash of light. The explosion rippled through the plaza, consuming the demonic entities and shaking the very foundations of Tisca. As the dust settled, the oppressive presence that had weighed upon the city lifted, replaced by an eerie silence. The iron shields stood amidst the ruins, breathing heavily but victorious. They had reclaimed Prospero, banished the remnants of the Thousand Suns, and severed the link to the powers of chaos that had corrupted the city. Yet Castiel knew that this was only a battle in a much larger war. The scars of conflict would remain, both on the land and in the hearts of those who had fought. As they regrouped, the weight of their actions pressed upon Castiel. They had confronted the darkness and emerged stronger, but the knowledge of what had been lost in Prospero would haunt them. The ruins of Tisca stood as a reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. With the planet secured, the Iron Shields began the long process of purging the remnants of the Thousand Suns and restoring what they could of the knowledge once cherished on Prospero. Castiel stood with his brothers, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their resolve strengthened by the battles they had fought and the victory they had achieved. They were the defenders of humanity, and they would not falter in their duty. The war for Prospero had drawn the attention of the broader Imperium, and soon whispers of the Iron Shield's victories against the Thousand Suns reached distant worlds. Yet, their triumph had not gone unnoticed by the greater forces at play. The Emperor's Chosen, a cadre of elite space marines known for their zealous devotion to the Emperor and their unyielding pursuit of the enemies of mankind, set their sights on the Iron Shields. The arrival of this new threat promised to challenge everything the Iron Shields had fought for. As the Iron Shields began to regroup and fortify their position in Tisca, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. They had reclaimed the city from the clutches of chaos, but Castiel and his brothers understood that the echoes of battle were far from silent. Tensions simmered as rumors circulated about a potent force dispatched to challenge their claim to glory. Aboard the Vigilant Watcher, Castiel met with Chapter Master Valerius and his veteran captains. The dimly lit chamber was filled with holographic displays depicting various reports. The data revealed the approach of a massive fleet bearing the insignia of the Emperor's Chosen. These were no ordinary space marines. They were famed for their unwavering loyalty, elite training, and a fanatical belief in their superiority over all other chapters. Each marine of this cadre had proven themselves against the most formidable foes in the galaxy and would stop at nothing to claim honor for their chapter. "Brothers, we face not just another enemy," Valerius stated, his voice steady yet laden with the weight of the situation. "The Emperor's Chosen believe they are the rightful heirs to his glory, and they see our victories as an affront to their honor." Castiel, standing resolute with his brothers, understood the stakes. They come not just to challenge our claim, they come to usurp our legacy. We cannot allow that to happen. We have fought too hard and sacrificed too much. Valerius nodded. "Prepare yourselves. We will meet them in the skies above Prospero. They will not take our honor without a fight." As the Vigilant Watcher powered its thrusters and ascended from the surface, the Iron Shields readied themselves for battle. The ship broke through the atmosphere, revealing a massive armada of the Emperor's Chosen looming ominously above Prospero. The fleet consisted of intricately designed warships, gleaming with the sigils of their chapter. Each vessel was a testament to their devotion, crafted for war and ready to assert their dominance. The Iron Shields immediately went to battle stations, their hearts pounding with the thrill of combat. Castiel took his place among his battle brothers on the bridge, the air thick with tension. The holographic displays showed enemy ships deploying from their larger vessels, strike craft zipping toward the planet. Each ship bore the unmistakable insignia of the Emperor's Chosen, a blazing sun surrounded by a golden halo. "Launch the Thunderhawks," Valerius commanded, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "We will not allow them to land unchallenged." With precision, the Iron Shields deployed their Thunderhawk gunships, each bristling with weapons and armed with elite squads of Space Marines. Castiel piloted his Thunderhawk alongside his brothers, adrenaline coursing through his veins. As they broke away from the vigilant Watcher, the ships soared toward the encroaching enemy, eager to engage. As the Iron Shield's Thunderhawks raced towards the enemy fleet, the battle erupted. Laser fire lit the void, illuminating the darkness as the two fleets clashed. The Iron Shields fought with relentless fury, their spirits high despite the odds. Castiel maneuvered his ship deftly, dodging enemy fire as he targeted a heavily armored enemy ship, intent on sowing chaos among their ranks. Within moments, the Thunderhawk's cannons roared, unleashing a torrent of fire. Explosions erupted across the enemy vessel's hull, sending debris scattering into the void. Castiel felt a rush of triumph, but it was short-lived. The Emperor's Chosen retaliated swiftly, their ships closing ranks and responding with equal ferocity. "Stay focused," Castiel shouted to his crew. "We must break their formation." The Iron Shields pressed the attack, their Thunderhawks working in perfect unison, targeting key enemy vessels. Each explosion lit the void, a testament to their resolve. Yet, as they fought, it became clear that the Emperor's Chosen were formidable adversaries. They maneuvered with precision and coordination, their tactics honed through countless battles. The clash of gunships continued as the battle escalated, the void filled with the sounds of explosions and the cries of war. The Iron Shields pressed forward, determined to shatter the pride of the Emperor's Chosen. They moved toward the center of the enemy fleet, where the flagship, the Luminous Dawn, waited, a massive fortress of gleaming armor and heavy weaponry. As they neared, the Luminous Dawn unleashed a devastating volley of fire, targeting the approaching Thunderhawks. Castiel's ship shook under the assault, but he held the controls steady, pressing on. They had to reach the flagship. It was the heart of the Emperor's Chosen fleet. "Prepare for boarding," Castiel commanded, rallying his brothers. They would not only challenge the fleet, but also infiltrate the flagship and confront its commander directly. The Iron Shields executed a daring maneuver, using the debris field from the destroyed enemy ships as cover. They drew closer to the Luminous Dawn, evading enemy fire until they found an opportunity to land on its deck. The Thunderhawk's landing gears touched down with a resounding thud, and the moment the ramp lowered, the Iron Shields surged forward. The flagship's interior was a labyrinth of corridors, adorned with the regalia of the Emperor's Chosen. Castiel led his squad through the darkened passages, bolters at the ready. They encountered several squads of the Emperor's Chosen, each clad in ornate power armor, their eyes gleaming with righteous fury. A fierce firefight erupted as both sides clashed. The air crackled with energy as bolts of plasma and lost fire filled the corridors, illuminating the ornate decorations with flashes of destruction. The Iron Shields fought with unyielding determination, each brother relying on the strength of their training and their bond with one another. As they pushed deeper into the flagship, they encountered a powerful warrior of the Emperor's Chosen, a veteran captain who bore an ornate power sword and a shield adorned with the insignia of their chapter. He stood as an immovable wall, directing his brothers with tactical precision. "Stand and deliver, iron shields," he shouted, his voice booming through the din of battle. "Your cowardly advance ends here." Castiel's heart raced as he faced the captain, a rival he had only heard stories of. This warrior was renowned for his prowess in battle and his unshakable resolve. The iron shield surged forward, bolters roaring, but the captain and his brothers countered with fierce efficiency, their training evident as they worked in unison. The firefight escalated into a brutal melee as both sides clashed, power swords and chainswords meeting with a symphony of metal against metal. Castiel fought valiantly, every swing of his blade filled with the determination to protect his brothers and honor their victories. The tide of battle swayed as both sides struggled for supremacy. Castiel faced the captain directly, their weapons clashing with resounding force. Each strike echoed the weight of their chapters, their beliefs crashing against one another. The captain's sword hummed with energy, and Castiel could feel the fury of the Emperor's chosen fueling his opponent's blows. With every exchange, the clash of wills intensified, and Castiel drew on his training, remembering the teachings of his mentors. He anticipated the captain's next move, countering with a feint before striking at his side. The captain stumbled, and Castiel seized the opportunity, driving his power sword forward, its blade piercing through the ornate armor of his foe. The captain fell, his eyes wide with shock as he realized defeat. As the remaining members of the Emperor's chosen witnessed the fall of their leader, their morale wavered. The iron shields surged forward, taking advantage of the moment, forcing the remaining enemies into retreat. With the captain defeated, Castiel rallied his brothers, pressing the attack against the remaining forces of the Emperor's chosen. The clash of war cries filled the flagship as the iron shields pushed deeper, determined to claim victory for their chapter. They fought fiercely, their bolters roaring as they swept through the corridors, reclaiming the heart of the luminous dawn. The Emperor's chosen, battered and demoralized, fell back toward the command deck, desperately trying to regroup. But the iron shields pursued relentlessly, their resolve unyielding. Finally, the iron shields breached the command deck, where the last remnants of the Emperor's chosen gathered in a final stand. The deck was adorned with the banners of the Emperor, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. The remaining warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes filled with determination as they faced the oncoming tide of the iron shields. "Brothers, stand firm," their new captain shouted, rallying the remaining forces. "We fight for the Emperor. We will not yield." Castiel stepped forward, leading his brothers into the fray. The battle raged on the command deck, the air thick with tension and the scent of burning metal. The iron shields clashed against their adversaries, pushing through with the strength of their convictions. As the battle escalated, Castiel felt the weight of their struggle against the Emperor's chosen. They were not just fighting for victory, they were fighting for their identity, their honor as Space Marines. With each fallen brother and each defeated enemy, the clash of wills reverberated through the command deck. Finally, as the last remnants of the Emperor's chosen fell before them, Castiel stood amidst the wreckage, his heart heavy but filled with the strength of their victory. The iron shields had proven their resolve, standing firm against the might of the Emperor's chosen and emerging triumphant. In the aftermath of the battle, Castiel and his brothers took a moment to reflect on their struggle. They had faced a formidable enemy and emerged victorious, but at a great cost. As they looked around the devastated command deck, they understood that they had forged a new chapter in their legacy, a chapter that would be written in the annals of history. With the Emperor's chosen defeated and their fleet in disarray, the Iron Shields returned to the surface of Prospero, their spirits bolstered by their hard-won victory. They had shown that honor lay not only in the victories claimed, but also in the strength of their resolve to protect the Imperium. As they regrouped, Castile knew that this battle had solidified their place among the legends of the Imperium. The Iron Shields would not be forgotten, and their legacy would endure through the trials they faced. They had stood firm against the wrath of the Emperor's Chosen, and as they prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, their bond was stronger than ever.